July 9, 1944. Marpi Point, northern tip of Saipan. Corporal Guy Gabaldon stood on the cliff edge shouting in Japanese through a megaphone. Above him, hundreds of Japanese civilians huddled at the cliff top. Women, children, elderly, terrified. Gabaldon spoke perfect Japanese. He'd grown up with a Japanese-American family in Los Angeles. Now he was pleading with these civilians, telling them the Americans wouldn't hurt them, that they'd be safe, that they should surrender. Some listened, started moving toward him. Then a Japanese soldier appeared, screamed at the civilians, told them the Americans would torture them, rape the women, kill the children. Better to die with honor than suffer that fate. And then they started jumping. Mothers holding babies, jumping 800 feet into the rocks below, families holding hands, jumping together. Old men, young women, children, one after another, they threw themselves off the cliff. Gabaldon watched helplessly. American troops nearby stood frozen. They couldn't stop it, couldn't save them, could only watch as hundreds of people chose death over surrender. This was the darkest moment of the Battle of Saipan. The day propaganda and fear turned victory into tragedy. The day Americans witnessed mass suicide and couldn't prevent it. Saipan was strategic, part of the Mariana Islands chain, only 1,300 miles from Tokyo. Capture Saipan and American B-29 bombers could reach Japan. The island had to fall. The Japanese knew this too. They'd fortified Saipan heavily. 30,000 troops, artillery in caves, machine gun nests covering every beach, concrete bunkers, a civilian population of over 20,000 that included many Japanese settlers. American planners expected a tough fight. 2 Marine divisions and 1 Army division would assault the island. 70,000 troops, massive naval gunfire support, carrier airstrikes, overwhelming force. The invasion began June 15th. 800 ships appeared offshore. Marines hit the beaches under heavy fire. The Japanese defenders fought from prepared positions. Caves, bunkers, spider holes. Every yard was contested. The first day cost 2,000 American casualties, but the Marines pushed inland, established a beachhead, brought tanks ashore. The Army's 27th Infantry Division landed and moved north. The advance continued. What followed was 3 weeks of brutal combat, cave fighting, clearing bunkers with flamethrowers and explosives. Japanese troops fighting to the death, no surrender. Every position had to be taken by force. American casualties mounted. The terrain favored defenders. Saipan was volcanic, steep ridges, dense vegetation, perfect for ambush. Japanese troops hid in caves during the day, attacked at night. American troops never felt safe. By early July, the Japanese were pushed into the northern tip of the island, surrounded, running out of ammunition and supplies. The battle was nearly over. Then came the final attack. The fighting on Saipan was as brutal as anything in the Pacific War. Japanese defenders used every tactic. Snipers tied themselves into trees. Artillery fired from cave mouths, then rolled back inside before counter-battery could respond. Booby traps killed Marines checking dead bodies. At night, Japanese troops infiltrated American lines, killed sentries, threw grenades into foxholes, created chaos. Marines learned to sleep in shifts, stay alert, trust no sound. The 27th Infantry Division advanced through the center of the island, encountered heavy resistance in an area called Death Valley. Japanese machine guns in the ridges above had perfect fields of fire. The division took heavy casualties and the advance stalled. Marine General Holland Smith relieved the 27th Division's commander. said the army wasn't advancing fast enough. This caused controversy between Army and Marine leadership that lasted for years. But the battle continued. Japanese civilians were caught in the middle. Many had been told Americans were monsters, that surrender meant torture and death. Japanese propaganda had convinced them for years that Americans were subhuman, would commit atrocities, better to die than be captured. As American troops advanced north, they encountered civilians. Some surrendered, realized the propaganda was lies. American troops gave them food, water, medical care, treated them humanely, but many believed the propaganda completely. And when the Japanese military was pushed to the northern tip of Saipan, those civilians went with them. To the cliffs. July 6. The Japanese defenders were surrounded at the northern end of Saipan. General Yoshitsugu Saito, commanding the garrison, knew the battle was lost. No reinforcements coming, no hope of victory. But surrender was not an option. Saito ordered a final attack, a massive banzai charge. Every able-bodied man would attack, armed with rifles, bayonets, swords, anything they could fight with. They'd break through American lines or die trying. Preferably both. Before the attack, Saito committed suicide. Traditional Japanese ritual. His second-in-command took over, organized the remaining troops, gave final orders. At dawn on July 7, the attack began. 4,000 Japanese soldiers charged, screaming, firing, running straight at American positions. It was suicide. American machine guns cut them down by the hundreds. Artillery shells exploded in their ranks. They kept coming. Some broke through the front lines, reached rear areas, killed wounded soldiers in aid stations, overran artillery positions, created chaos. American troops fought them hand to hand, with rifles, with bayonets, with entrenching tools. The banzai charge lasted all day. By evening, it was over. Nearly all 4,000 Japanese attackers were dead. American casualties were over 600 killed. It was the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War, and it accomplished nothing except death. The American lines held. The battle continued. Japanese resistance was broken. What remained were pockets of troops and thousands of terrified civilians being pushed toward the northern cliffs. The cliffs at the northern end of Saipan rise hundreds of feet above the ocean. Sheer rock faces, sharp coral below. The Japanese called one area Suicide Cliff. As American troops closed in, Japanese civilians gathered at these cliffs. Families, mothers with children, elderly, mixed with remaining Japanese soldiers, all told the same thing. Americans would torture them, commit atrocities. Death was better. Japanese soldiers distributed grenades to civilians, told them how to die with honor. Kill your children first so they don't suffer. Then kill yourself. Some civilians followed these instructions. Others were pushed, forced off the cliffs by soldiers who wouldn't let them surrender. Japanese military police threatened civilians who hesitated, told them surrender was treason, that their families would be shamed. American troops approaching the cliffs tried to stop it, shouted for people to surrender, promised safety, food, medical care. Some listened, came down, were taken into American custody and realized the propaganda was lies. But hundreds didn't listen, or couldn't listen over the shouts of Japanese soldiers, or were too terrified to trust anything. And so they jumped. Men, women, children, throwing themselves off cliffs to avoid capture. Marines watched in horror. Some tried to climb the cliffs to reach people, were too late. Others shouted themselves hoarse, trying to convince people to surrender. Nothing worked. The suicides continued for days. Marpi Point at the northern tip of Saipan became the worst sight. 800-foot cliffs. Thousands of civilians and soldiers gathered there. The final strong point. Guy Gabaldon was there trying to convince people to surrender. He'd already convinced hundreds of Japanese soldiers and civilians to give up during the battle. Spoke their language, understood their culture, told them Americans weren't monsters. At Marpi Point, he tried again. Used a megaphone, shouted in Japanese. Some responded, started coming toward American lines. Then Japanese soldiers intervened, screamed that it was lies, that surrender meant death and dishonor. What followed was mass suicide. Families jumped together. Mothers threw babies off the cliff, then followed. Young women jumped in groups holding hands. Old men bowed toward Japan, then jumped. It went on for hours. American soldiers tried everything. Some waded into the water below, trying to save people who jumped and survived the fall. Most didn't survive. The rocks killed them instantly. Or the sharks got them. Navy ships offshore tried to intervene, used loudspeakers, promised rescue, safety. Some civilians swam out to the ships and were saved, but most never made it, either drowned or chose to drown rather than be rescued. Estimates vary on how many died at Marpi Point and Suicide Cliff. At least 1,000, maybe more. Entire families wiped out. Children who never had a choice, all because propaganda convinced them death was better than American mercy. The Battle of Saipan officially ended July 9. 24 days of combat. American casualties were over 16,000. 3,000 killed. 13,000 wounded. The 27th Infantry Division was decimated. Japanese military casualties were nearly total. Almost 30,000 troops killed. Fewer than 1,000 captured. Most of those wounded and unable to fight. Healthy Japanese soldiers almost never surrendered. Civilian casualties were catastrophic. At least 22,000 Japanese civilians died. Many killed in the fighting. Thousands killed themselves rather than surrender. Others died from starvation and disease, hiding in caves. The psychological impact on American troops was severe. Many had joined the military to fight soldiers, not to watch civilians kill themselves. Marines and soldiers who witnessed the cliff suicides were traumatized. Some never spoke about it again. The suicides also changed American understanding of what they faced. This wasn't a normal war where defeated enemies surrendered. This was total war. An enemy so indoctrinated, they'd rather die than accept defeat. That had implications for the rest of the war. If Japanese civilians on Saipan preferred death to surrender, what would happen when Americans invaded Japan itself? How many millions would die fighting to the last man? These questions haunted military planners for the next year. Saipan's capture changed the Pacific War. B-29 bombers began operating from the island within months. Bombing raids on Japan increased. The strategic value was proven. But Saipan also changed American strategy. The mass suicides convinced military leaders that invading Japan would cost millions of lives on both sides. If civilians on Saipan jumped off cliffs rather than surrender, Japanese civilians on the home islands would do worse. This influenced the decision to use atomic bombs. The alternative was invasion. Operation Downfall. Estimates ranged from hundreds of thousands to over 1 million American casualties. Japanese casualties would be in the tens of millions, including massive civilian deaths as the population fought to defend their homeland. The atomic bombs killed over 200,000 people at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Horrible. Devastating. But compared to the casualties expected from invasion and the mass suicides witnessed at Saipan, military planners believed it was the lesser evil. Today, memorials at Suicide Cliff and Marpi Point honor those who died, both Japanese civilians and American troops. The cliffs remain, silent witnesses to tragedy. Japanese civilians jumping off cliffs rather than surrender to Americans at Saipan remains one of the most haunting images of World War II. A testament to the power of propaganda, the horror of total war, and the terrible choices faced by everyone caught in that conflict. The Battle of Saipan was an American victory, strategically important, necessary for winning the war. But it came at a cost that went beyond battlefield casualties. It showed the depths of desperation and fear that war creates, and it left scars on everyone who witnessed it.